You know, by today's standards, you could probably call everyone involved in everything in the mid-1800s racist. But like Steve said, who cares, right? This theory has nothing to do with race. In fact, in Origin of Species, because I've read that also,
me too.
The term, when he uses the word race, this has nothing to do with people. In fact, he mentions people like twice, like once or twice in Origin of Species, something like that. Race had a different meaning to Darwin. Race was more like, I think, varieties or species, something along those lines.
Breeds. Actually, it'd be breeds, actually, because there's artificial.
Breeds.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was and like Steve said, he was progressive for his time because he was an abolitionist, and he wrote fervently against slavery. On seeing the slaves in Uruguay, I believe it was, he wrote, like, you know, how terrible it is that we and Americans boast about freedom and liberty, and yet we're enslaving people. You know, how ridiculous is this? And so, there's actually a really good book on Darwin called Darwin's Fossils, where it talks about Darwin as he goes across the world and his thoughts as he travels and all that. It's a very interesting book. I would definitely recommend it. But as Steve said, ultimately it doesn't really matter.
Let me read this part of it, because I think that if the statements that you say were not racist were said today, you would be considered a racist. Meeting the simple Indians of Tierra del Fuego, Darwin wrote, I could not have believed how wide was the difference between savage and civilized man. It is greater than between wild and domesticated animals. Viewing such a man, one can hardly make oneself believe that they are fellow creatures and inhabitants of the same world. Let me go on. Another time.
Okay, let's address that.
Can you cite the page? Can I grab my copy so you can cite the page and we can look at it together?
Yeah. Another text. In some future period, not very distant, as measured by centuries, the civilized races of men will almost certainly exterminate and replace the savage races throughout the world.
Right. Sure. And by the way, we're all very familiar with these quotes. We've heard them a million times.
Yeah, we are.
So now anybody say that a person not racist write something like that.
Pastor, you're going to have to let us talk.
Yeah.
We've all heard these before. These are nothing new to any of us. We've actually read the original materials for the most part. I haven't read Descent of Man, but I have read Origin of Species. These are what called quote minings, because Jackson understands these things in context, and I don't think you're understanding them in context, because he literally just explained to you.
I do. That's why I'm making the points that I'm making. I'm continuing to interrupt it instead of finishing my point. If you allow me to finish my point, then you come in and ask. But each time I get started, you cut me off without allowing me to finish to make the point that I'm trying to make. The point that I'm trying to make is this right here. These texts that we're reading, now for you as a white person, don't see it as being racist. Any person that's black or brown or an Aborigine or an African, see it exactly for what it is. That is a racist statement. And this being the genesis of evolution, the start of the theory of evolution, then you have to say that its genesis is racist. That you cannot, when he says that the savage races will be exterminated or annihilated, and he goes on to say that the European or the Caucasian is the civilized race, then you have to question that. Is it truly science? Is it something he's truly found? Or is it something that he's simply going with the times? And this is what I've heard others explain it. Well, folks were racist at that time, so that was the general thought for people thought or believe. Is that science? That's not science. That's a thought.
Well, let me say this real quick, because there's a few problems that you said. I happen to know some black atheists that have no problem. They do not think that those things were racist comments. Psychopath atheist is an atheist. He accepts evolution. He doesn't think those were racist comments, because they weren't directly to the black people. They were directed to uncivilized cultures. And also, you have also Emperor Atheist. He doesn't think he's black. He doesn't think that they're racist comments. So you can't just make this blanket assertion that anybody who's black is going to make this leap. It has nothing to do with whether they're black or white. Well, hang on. It's if they understand the context of the material written. Big difference.
Right.
Dr. Pascal Mbenga who's the superintendent of public schools here in Durham, is in agreement too that evolution is racist. Dr. Ojinga Harrison, who is a doctor,
he's not a biologist.
Dr. Ojinga Harrison, who is a doctor of psychiatry, saying that he says that evolution is the backbone of racism. So I mean, you got all these people.
Can I explain
and guess what?
first?
You know the common denominator. Do you know the common denominator between both the doctor in the school system and the doctor of psychiatry? You know the common denominators for both of them?
Yeah, they're not experts on biology.
They're both black. They're both black.
Go ahead.
Can I point out something to you, Mr. Williams? Well, the first thing you made that I took issue with was you said this racism is the origin of evolution. The origin of evolution was long before the mid 1800s. People were making observations that were leading up to what would eventually come to be called evolution. Long before the mid 1800s. People who didn't have slaves also, or and it didn't really matter. Also, like I said, Darwin had a black teacher at one point, so these ideas are not about races necessarily. They're about cultures. They're about cultures with specific tools, specific lifestyles. They're not directed at any skin color specifically. And again, regardless of whether or not Darwin is racist, we can call him racist all day. At the end of the day, what does that matter? Because evolution as we know it today does not depend on Darwin. It depends entirely on genes and the environment. That has nothing to do with race. So what does any of that matter? What does it matter?
He asked me the question.
Okay, go ahead.
I want to ask this question first. What does it matter? Okay. What it matters is that when you have school-age children, as Dr. Pascal Mabinga of the Durham school system said, and Dr. Ojinga Harrison, a doctor of psychiatry, when you have black children being negatively impacted by a textbook that shows black folk looking like monkeys and apes and modern man looking Caucasian and
that's
white.
Not the case.
That's a problem.
That's not the case.
That's a problem.
That's not the case. When you say it's
wait. I'm answering this question. Can I finish?
What's being in the textbooks?
Can I ask this question?
Sure.
I thought I was question. What's the problem with it?
Right here. Go ahead.
So what?
I said.
And that's the problem. And the point that I'm trying to make is this right here. Is because you're white, Caucasian, or European, you can't see the insults and the hurts that comes from the teaching of evolution. And the reason why you can't see it because you're on the upper end, the way it's depicted in the textbooks, where it's depicted in the statements of Darwin, the way it's depicted as you say before Darwin, Carl Linnaeus makes the very same statements about blacks being sly, lazy, and neglectful, but the white European is changeable, clever, and inventive. And this is in textbooks. And these are the people who are looking to give us evolution. And you're trying to say, and you're trying.
Which textbook are you referring to? Yeah,
Can you cite a specific textbook?
Which textbooks?
Carl Linnaeus. Read up on Carl Linnaeus.
He's been dead for a very long time. He's not in modern textbooks.
Yeah. Can I read a quote?
But he's the father. He's the father of taxonomy. He's the one. He was the one that inspired Darwin.
He was actually religious. Believe it or not, he was very religious. Go ahead.
Can I read you a quote from Darwin real quick, just to show you what his feelings on like slavery and racism was back then? This is a direct quote from Darwin. Okay, he says this was in a letter to Catherine Darwin on the 22nd of May in 1833. He said, "I have watched how steadily the general feeling, as shown at elections, has been rising against slavery. What a proud thing for England, if she is the first European nation which utterly abolishes it. I was told before leaving England that after living in slave countries, all my opinions would be altered. The only alteration I am aware of is forming a much higher estimate of their character. It is impossible to see a Negro and not feel kindly towards him. Such cheerful and open and honest expressions I have never saw any of the diminutive Portuguese with their countenances without almost wishing for Brazil to follow the same example of Haiti. So basically what he's saying there is he's praising the fact that England is about to abolish it in hopes that the United States does the same thing. So if he was racist, why would he
work of a racist?
Can I respond?
Sure.
The Ku Klux Klan call themselves Christians, but no one else does but them, because they're in violation of everything the Word of God says. The same thing with Darwin. You can say that he's not a racist, but his statements says otherwise. When you read the statements that I just read to you and what he said, and if you're not offended as a black person, if you're not offended, if you can't see the harm that is done to a black person, then I'm saying you have your eyes closed. You're not in the real world. You're not in reality.
Let me say this. Pastor Williams, are you familiar with, it was recently in the news, are you familiar with the island of, it's called North Sentinel Island? Have you heard about this story?
No, tell me.
Okay, North Sentinel Island was recently in the news because it is a island that has one of the world's only non-contacted tribes. They don't even know if they have fire yet. This island has been just isolated from the rest of the world. The Indian government protects it, but a missionary.
Oh yes, I heard it. Yes. Okay. I know it now. Uh-huh.
Okay, now when Darwin uses the term savages, that's the kind of group he was referring to, because they are savage. Like when that missionary went to North Sentinel Island, he was shot for trying to tell them about Jesus. Those are the savages that Darwin is referring to. He's not referring to a race of people, the tribes and things like that. He's not talking about African Americans or anything like that. He's talking about those types of savages.
Yeah, he was talking about that linear social incline that Jackson Wheat was referring to. He's talking about the people that are uncivilized. It has nothing to do with the specific skin color. You're reading that into that when nobody else who understands the material would do that. It is a fundamental misunderstanding that you have reading that type of context into something that is not there. Now, let me ask you this real quick. If
well, let me read another.
I'm in the middle of a question here. Hang on.
Let him respond to that one first before we go into another question. Let him see. I want to see what he has to say about what you and I just said.
This is the other part of his quote. The break between man and his nearest allies will then be wider, for it will be between man and a more civilized state, as we may hope, even than the Caucasian, and some ape as low as a baboon, instead of as now between the Negro or Australian and the gorilla. He makes the comparison there to the Negro. And for someone to say, no, he doesn't, or trying to ignore what he actually wrote, you're not being honest. You're being disingenuous. He wrote, like I say, the Ku Klux Klan, they say that they are Christians. But there is no black person would tell you that the Ku Klux Klan are Christians. And the same thing, there is no black person who's read these quotes from Darwin would not say that he wasn't a racist. And if he's a racist, then what science does he have to offer? You say it's the culture, say it's culture. Don't say that it's science. And we're talking about evolution.
So I asked you earlier, and you did not respond at any point to my question. What does Darwin being racist at all have to do with either genes or how the environment impacts genes? You did not answer that. You dodged it and went straight to this.
Later on.
Hang on, Sylvester. Hang on. This goes to my question because I want to ask.
You did not answer my question because
I will answer. You want me to answer it now?
No, hang on. My question. Hang on. Okay. My question goes right to this. If Einstein was a Jew-hating Nazi, would that invalidate relativity? Pastor, let me ask it again because we didn't hear it. If Einstein was a Jew-hating Nazi, would that falsify that relativity is a fact?
I think he heard you.
If Einstein was a Jew-hating what? Say it again.
He was Nazi. I didn't hear it. Would that invalidate relativity?
Your voice sort of went down. You're not as clear as you were before. As far as me hearing you, I'm not sure what happened.
Nazi.
I was checking my system to see
if Einstein was a Nazi, would that affect relativity? His theory of relativity, would that in any way, shape, or form?
You know what?
Impact it?
It would if hisism was a part of the theory. But racism is not a part of theory of relativity. But for evolution,